Welcome to 5 Good Minutes.
You're listening to today's inspirational message
On the book of Romans with Kurt Bjorklund.
This week we've been considering the ways that people have interpreted Romans 7, verse 14 through 24. And I've argued that ultimately this is Paul speaking of his actual experience, that when he says, I'm unspiritual, sold as a slave to sin, verse 14. Nothing good lives in me. That is in my sinful nature, verse 18. And verse 21, when I do what is good, evil is right there with me, that each of these is actually his experience. And he's not really trying to excuse sin or encourage it. What he's doing is he is speaking to the depth of the struggle. And James Montgomery Boyce, who I followed a little bit this week in the presentation, suggests in his commentary on this that in America we try to avoid dealing with sin in at least 3 ways. Because again, what Paul is not advocating is an excuse, but he's saying it is a struggle. You have to stay in this if you want to deal with your sin. And what James Montgomery Boyce says is we try to avoid it through formulaic approaches, meaning we'll say, well, here, do these 3 things. Here's 4 steps that you need to take. And that it's a lot of ways a lazy optimism, he says. It's an expectation that life is meant to be easy, not hard. So if we do find the Christian life hard, we assume that we're merely missing the right formula. And so what we do is we just look for formulas. Second way that he talks about this is we look for a new experience, that we try to avoid the struggle with sin by simply hunting for some kind of second work of grace, some spiritual power, some breakthrough to let us not have to struggle with it. And if we think this way, we'll always be looking for a new experience. And then the third way that he talks about is avoidance. And that is we try to escape the struggle by simply saying, I'm not meant to struggle this hard. And so we just either kind of numb ourselves by not thinking about it, or we excuse it and just say, hey, it is what it is. And what James Montgomery Boyce argues for instead is what he calls spiritual realism, where we understand that we are in a struggle and that we do attain and seek victory over sin. And I just want to quote him directly here. Here's what he says. I close this study by suggesting that a gospel in which we must do everything possible to attain victory over sin, but in which, in spite of all we do or can ever do, the victory, when it comes, is by God alone and not by us or for our glory. A gospel like that must be from God. It could never have been invented by man. The very nature of our gospel is proof of its divine origin. Left to ourselves, what do? We do one of 2 things. Either we create a gospel of works so that our salvation depends on our own righteousness and our sanctification likewise depends on our own ability to defeat sin and choose righteousness. Or else we retreat into passivity and say, since the battle is God's and there's nothing I can do to achieve victory, I might as well just sit back and let God do his work. To our way of thinking, it seems that it must be either of these 2 choices. But the Bible, through Paul, says something quite different. And here he quotes Philippians 2:12 through 13. Therefore, my dear friends, as you have always obeyed, not only in my presence, but now much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you to will and to act according to his good purpose. The Christian life is not easy. No responsible person has ever said that it was. It's a battle all the way. But it is a battle that will be won. And when it's won, we who have triumphed will cast our crowns at the feet of Jesus Christ, who worked in us to accomplish the victory, and we will praise him forever. You know, I don't know where you are in this battle, but what Romans 7, 14 through 24 really does is it says, stay in the battle because there's victory ahead. And don't take either of these 2 easy paths out, either that we're left to ourselves just to figure it out, and we have this works righteousness either in our justification or our sanctification, or a complete passivity, but that we want to lean in and continue in the battle.
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.